Good evening and welcome to the Select Board meeting for July 20th, 2021. This meeting is being held remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. My name is Katie Conlon. I'm the Chair of the Select Board. And why don't we go around the Zoom room and have everybody introduce themselves? I like that better than the Chair introducing everyone.
Arthur Doyle, Vice Chair.
Mike Zulus, Secretary.
Melinda Collins, member.
Richard Wells, member.
Mike Dennehy, Town Administrator.
And Susie.
Susie Stewart, Executive Assistant.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Milton Access Television is recording tonight's meeting. Would everyone please join us in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the
To
flag
the flag,
United States
United States of America,
and to the
and to
to the
republic
republic
which it
for
stands,
which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty,
and
justice
justice.
justice
for all.
for all.
Okay, next item on our agenda is public comments. Do we have anyone that's here this evening for public comment? If so, please raise your hand. Yeah, I see no hands raised. So we will go on to our next item, which is the Select Board's comments on 240B projects, 582 Blue Hill Avenue and the Ice House at 485, 487 Blue Hills Parkway. Do we want to start with the Ice House first? I think that one will be a little bit simpler and faster.
I agree. We can acquit it.
Okay, so
Put a
I sent
motion.
her- as promised, at the last meeting, I sent around a draft of a letter in the hopes that everyone would bring any comments this evening. Arthur did ask me to make sure we CC John Kiernan on the letter. He says we're referencing the Conservation Commission that, and there is a proceeding before them that they receive a copy of it as well. Did anyone have any comments on the Ice House letter or further comments that we want to add or changes to make? Mr. Zulus.
Just one comment, just the form over substance, I think, on the 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph at the bottom, whether it says whether filed under Chapter 40B or zoning. I think there's probably a word missing there, or or maybe or for zoning, or that's the only question that I had.
We just read the sentence again. I think the point was just that if it's somebody who comes in for special permit, say before the planning board, or a variance before the Board of Appeals, not in the 40B context, that nevertheless, the developers' willingness to work with all of the officials and the boards involved would be a model for those as well. I don't know how to say it other than zoning.
Local.
Local zoning? Is that what you said, Arthur?
Yes, would that do it?
I think so.
Well,
Melinda?
sorry. I think I see, Mike, why you said form over substance, because it's under Chapter 40B or under zoning, really. I mean, it's so I don't
I
know.
see what you're saying. Yes, under zoning.
Yeah, so, if we were talking about units specifically, we could say produced under zoning, but this is simply applications. So
I understand it now. So
Want to add the word under before zoning? Why don't we do that?
That's fine.
Okay.
Madam Chair, would you like a motion to support your comments, these final comments?
Sure. I think it would be to approve and sign and submit the letter to the Board of Appeals, although we may want to use the electronic signatures. We should probably include that in the motion, Richard. So that
I'll make a motion to approve and use our electronic signatures and forward to the ZBA our final comment, these final comments regarding the Ice House.
Second.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? Yes,
Thank you.
Collins.
I just
Sorry.
wanted to say thank you. They're excellent, and I very much appreciate your putting them together.
I think it's shorter the better for this one, since the Board of Appeals has already largely weighed in favorably on this project. Okay, then all in favor, Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus,
yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Myself, yes. We had talked last week about whether we wanted to go to the Board of Appeals meeting on Thursday evening, the 22nd, this week, in addition to submitting a written letter. And I think we were open to doing that. Does anyone have any further thoughts on that?
I may not be available, but if, I thought we had talked about you, Madam Chair, and perhaps Melinda going with you, but
For tomorrow, for the 582 Blue Hill Avenue.
okay.
Thank you. But I think Mike Zulus actually is the one who said we might want to go into the Ice House hearing as well.
Is it on Zoom or is it a public, is it a in-person meeting?
It's on
As soon
Zoom.
as
We're
if it's on
not
Zoom, I
posted-
might be able to do it.
We're
Okay.
not posted for the full board, so we couldn't all go in. It just would be a matter of, Mike, I think you volunteered to go in last week. I am available. I don't know if Melinda's available. We'll get to 582 shortly, and we have more extensive comments on that one. That's a different situation.
Madam Chair, I am not available on the 22nd.
Ms. Collins?
Well, Madam Chair, if Mr. Zulus and yourself are both available, I think that it's a kind of a nice bookend. We have the current chair and the chair who, was working with this applicant at the time. So if you're both willing to do that Thursday, I think that would be quite nice.
I actually am willing, but I spoke too soon in terms of availability last week. I have the initial production of a play that one of my children is in, so I can't.
I thought you were gonna say, I was waiting for you to say you were in it.
No. So I can't miss opening night.
All right, no, that's totally understandable. Okay, well, if it's necessary, the planning director, Tim Zerwinski, thought we probably don't really need to appear, but why don't I consult with Tim and see what he thinks? Maybe he could check with John Leonard, whether it's sufficient to just submit a written letter, and if not, I'm happy to attend it if we'd like. If there's a strong preference by the board that we attend it in person.
And Madam Chair, if I may, if Tim can just express our gratitude, the gratitude of the board for the work of the developer here and their work with the community and with the board, that would be, if I were available, I would go, but I think that'll probably be sufficient, along with the letter.
All right, I'll check in with Tim Zerwinski tomorrow. All right, so we've got one out of the way. 582 Blue Hill Avenue. Susie is going to put up for us on the screen the architectural drawings for the revised plan, just so that anyone watching the meeting has those. May not have seen them if you're not following the Board of Appeals meetings. So Susie, if you could put those slides up for us. Right, I think if you go down to the bottom, is page 19 has some drawings that can be enlarged. And while we're doing this, all of these renderings and plans and everything that's been filed with the Board of Appeals for the 40B projects is all on the town website. You just go to the Board of Appeals page on the website, click on the 40B in the upper left-hand corner, and then all of the projects are listed by address. Click on the address and you'll be brought to a lot of documents, including public comments and others for each project. Okay, so this is the current revision that has been filed. There's obviously a lot of angles and floor plans that are shown in the architect's drawings, but I thought this conveyed to the public best what is being considered. So this does preserve the large part of the home, the McGinley Mansion built in 1925, and the garden, which you can see on the lower picture to the left of the home. And then I believe a small portion of the original mansion is being removed in order to be replaced with one of the apartment structures to the left in the upper picture. And then there's another one. It's on the right in the upper picture, and in the bottom you see that they're at perpendicular angles to each other. So these are the latest plans. It's different than the original plan that was filed when we were in the project eligibility phase before our board a year and a half ago. And when it was originally filed with the Board of Appeals, I can't remember how many months ago now, the plan at that time was still the one large box on the site, and the developer has gone back and decided to preserve the mansion and the garden in response to a lot of the peer reviews and the public comments that have been made to the Board of Appeals. So as discussed at the meeting last week, we talked about Ms. Collins and I appearing tomorrow evening at the Board of Appeals to offer comments from the board. And we've both circulated today our draft comments for discussion this evening. The idea would be that Ms. Collins would focus on affordable housing and I would focus on some issues. There are many issues in this case. And I sat down with the planning director on Friday to go over what he thought were probably the best issues for us to raise, knowing that we're not the technical experts here, the peer reviewers are the technical experts, and stormwater is a big issue in this case, but there's already been quite a lot of testimony from the peer reviewers, from the neighbors, consultants, but from the DPW director on that matter. So my thought would be to call to the attention of the Board of Appeals that we're not here to provide technical expertise, but we are here as the chief executive board of the town to weigh in with some comments, mainly in the areas of public safety and public health that we think are important. And the ones that Mr. Zawinski and I identified were the intensity of the use on the site, minimizing the impact on town infrastructures, including stormwater and the sewer drain system, school bus pickup and drop off on Blue Hill Avenue, and maintenance of the historic garden going forward. And it's one thing to say that we're going to preserve it, but how are they planning to maintain it? And might there be any opportunity for public access to the garden, even on a limited number of days of the year? So that's really in a nutshell the comments that I put together. And the idea was to keep them brief, although I'm happy to add to these anything that any of our members would like. Mr. Zulus sent me back some comments a short while ago that I thought was good. And I think we forward them to everyone has those. Ms. Collins, did you want to talk about the comments that you were going to raise tomorrow?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Zulus also sent me excellent. It's amazing what a handful of words actually can do, putting the right words in the right place. And I think everyone has those now. So I would be happy to they're clarifying and really good. So I too, if people feel that there's a change that needs to be made to these comments, I'm happy to also make them. Anyone who got the original draft realized that it was quite data heavy, and I think it's much better now. Thank you, Mr. Zawinski. He cut some of it out and quite improved it as well. So the highlights here are really the need for additional housing stock, but also additional housing types in order to meet the needs of several groups, elders, and the disabled, but also families to an extent, renters in particular. I mean, it's impossible to include everything from the housing production plan, but there's also data that illustrates the needs because of the gap between adjusted income and also the median housing costs, and also cost burdening data. So that's it in a nutshell. There's also an invitation at the end by the board to add to the affordability. So it's at 80% AMI right now. Would love to see it lower because we do have folks in town who are severely cost burdened, and that actually also includes people who don't qualify for affordable housing. So that leads to the need for that diversified housing stock that can provide more housing types, and people who don't qualify for subsidized housing might have more naturally occurring affordable housing. So we've invited in this letter, if people so choose, lower the threshold, and also to add to the amenities that would make these units suitable for seniors and those with disabilities, and also the energy efficiency standards to really try to meet the highest standard possible, because that's not only good for the environment and good for health, but it's also good for the affordability for every person who's going to rent in the units. I'm done.
So I don't know if, does anyone want to leave this up on the screen, or have we seen the photos enough? If,
Just one question, Madam Chair.
yes, Mr.
Am I,
Wells.
am I looking, so on the lowest screen, is that actually 138, the roadway, or is that the driveway? Because if my memory's correct now, I don't think
So,
138 touches the garden.
yeah, the lower picture is really being shown probably from the direction of Barber Lane, looking
Okay.
towards the site
Looking up,
from the
yep.
back. For the lower picture, Meeting House Lane would be to the right and lower behind where these cars are parked. And Barber Lane would be to the left of the site. The top picture is, I think this is still the interior driveway, but the top picture is closer, is the view from Blue Hill Avenue.
Okay.
So that you would still see the home facing the street with, or some of it anyway, with the large structure on the left and another structure fronting along Blue Hill Avenue behind a tree covering. I have that right, Ms. Collins?
Yeah, I think the road, Madam Chair, that we see on that left-hand side where the garden is, I think that's actually the circulating road within the
Property.
project. So yeah, I think that's, and as you said, we're kind of looking kitty corner, from not quite the left. So
It's hard to see, but the overview map on the left, there's a little black triangle that shows you the view. So so the top one is coming in from Blue Hill Avenue, but as Ms. Collins said, it's at an angle or a diagonal.
And just a final point for Melinda, just because I was in this boat myself once, and even I forget it, but someone brought it up to me the other day, is our young employees who come to work for this town. It's very hard for them to find housing. Our teachers, our police officers, our firefighters, DPW, all of them, even nurses, BI Medical, BI Milton. Historically, there were so many locations in this town where our predecessors took great lengths when they could to try and create housing for the people who make up the infrastructure of our town, which is our place. So, and I'll leave that to you. I'm not going to dwell on it, but if you would just make note of that.
Ms. Collins?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, Mr. Wells, actually, there's a statistic that doesn't speak directly to town employees' incomes, but the average worker in Milton, which of course would include our employees, makes $55,000 a year, as that's the median income. So I would be happy to work that in as a comment, if that's.
Thank you very much. I would
Okay.
greatly appreciate that.
Okay.
I'm done. I'm happy with it, Madam Chair. I think it's come a long way from where it was.
So unless anyone else would like to keep the architectural drawings up, why don't we, I don't see any indication of that. Why don't we take the drawings down, Susie, and we can go back to our Zoom boxes. There we go. Thank you. So we touched on it last week, but I think the feeling is that we would speak to both issues that are brought forward by the still very large footprint and impervious space on this site, and the intensity of the use of this proposal, but at the same time recognize that there is a need in the town for affordable housing. And since we are the select board and we are the ones that will appoint the Affordable Housing Trust and the Housing Committee and have approved the housing production plan, that it's appropriate for us to take both tracks here and emphasize the need for housing, while at the same time issues that we're hoping the Board of Appeals will take into account when they make their decision on this application. Does anyone have anything else that we'd like to add? Any other issues that we should be bringing up tomorrow aside from school bus and stormwater and town? Mr. Doyle.
Madam Chair, thank you. I thought the document, all these documents are so well done. And I like Michael's modifications. They are definite enhancements. This first one is very similar to one that I had. I wanted to ask a question of you, Madam Chair, with respect to your earlier comment about preservation of the garden. All too often, there is the opportunity for gardens of this nature to denigrate over time. And I was wondering if there is any way that we can enter some type of a clause calling from preservation of the garden in perpetuity.
That's the goal. I think the concern is that as the peer reviewer testified early in this case, the garden was really built for a single family home and not for 88, or I think it's 88 units. That's the proposal currently stands at. So how is that going to be maintained in the future? And if there's a lot of families, I think there is a play structure for kids on this facility, but with 88 residences on the site, how will the garden be maintained? So I think the way I wrote it in this, and we can beef this up, is just a maintenance plan for the historic Shipman Garden after construction for the life of the project should be required. So if the Board of Appeals decides to issue a comprehensive permit, they can impose a lot of conditions, and that could be one of them. And maybe, maybe Mr. Rowe, maybe there's additional language we should add there. But that's the intent of the comment, really, is to try to preserve it.
I'm always much more convinced when it's made explicit, and we really couldn't leave it to the Board of the ZBA to use our wording. So I just leave that as again a question, and maybe something that we can somehow figure out. So that there is no denigration, considering that the mass occupancy of the area is going to be substantially increased.
Yeah, and I think the way this is going to work is they're going to take our comments, as well as all of the comments that have been offered to date, and work them into the ones that they think are important, work them into conditions. They do have Judy Barrett as their technical consultant. And at the last hearing, they already were discussing the applicant's attorney and Ms. Barrett working on conditions. So I think it's important that we raise the issue, and that Ms. Barrett probably already has some good language for a condition, but if there's anything that we want to suggest specific wording, we could always do that.
Madam Chair,
That was my suggestion there, Richard.
Madam Chair,
Well-
just to follow up to Arthur's comments into what you wrote is perhaps instead of maintenance, perhaps a preservation sustainability plan, preservation of the existing as it was designed, and a sustainability. I mean, in my memory, in the back of Winter Valley, there's something similar to this that existed when it was the Whitney estate, and it still lives today. I just don't know how they preserved that, how they did it. That's what made me think of when both you and Arthur talked, is perhaps a preservation sustainability plan for the garden.
Preservation and sustainability would be far superior to maintenance. And I would accept that as a substitute for in perpetuity. You just have to do that.
Do we want to say all three, of maintenance or preservation, sustainability, and maintenance?
Yeah, I'll take all three.
This is just going to be our comment. They're going to write their own conditions, but they may decide to use our wording.
I had a couple of more, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Considering the positioning of Trout Brook in that area, did we want to, in the next paragraph, where we talk at the end about peer reviewers and the Public Works Director and Fire Chief, add the Conservation Commission Chairman?
Let's see, where are you, Mr.?
This is the second page, the second paragraph, first full new paragraph on that page, beginning members.
I see it. So peer reviewers, Public Works Director, Fire Chief, and Conservation Commission.
Yes, if that's agreeable.
Okay.
On the following page, we were talking about intensity, minimize impact on town infrastructure. I don't know if other bodies are going to take care of this, but I haven't seen or heard much relative to this property regarding snow removal or snow storage, and the impact of snow storage on drainage. That's
Did you say no storage, no snow storage on drainage? Was that what you said, Arthur?
I'm raising the question as to inclusion of concerns about snow removal and any snow storage.
Okay,
If there's going to be snow storage there, that's going to exacerbate drainage because
I
it
know-
has a fairly large impervious surface.
it's a good point, and I know there's been some testimony at the Board of Appeals on that. So why don't I check in with Tim Serwinski tomorrow on that point and
Thank
maybe
you.
work this into bullet point 2.
And the last question I had, it says the applicant should be required in that same paragraph. Should be the applicant and its successors.
Casey sells it.
Yes, sir.
Casey sells it.
Sure, I'll write that in.
Thank you. Those are all my comments, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Arthur. That's very helpful. Does anyone else have any comments? Either on mine or Melinda's drafts? Mr. Zulus.
Just as a general matter, Madam Chair, I think that the statements balance well the recognition of the need for affordable housing with the fact that this project, though improved, is still overwhelming, really, for the residential neighborhoods in the area. And I think the desire and the encouragement for the applicant to continue to work with the neighborhood to achieve a good, to achieve the best possible project. I think that is well, those words are well chosen, and I appreciate it. I thought it was well done. So, I guess my question is, in addition to delivering those remarks on Wednesday, is it Wednesday? So Wednesday?
Yes,
Yeah.
Jay, that's right. Yes, Wednesday.
On Wednesday, does it make sense to either before or after publish the remarks on the website, or I leave it to you, but just so that the public can actually see the remarks in addition to hearing them.
I suppose we could submit it after the fact to
Yeah.
the Board of Appeals, and they can put it in their 40B file for this project.
It may
They
be
do have a
helpful.
lot of letters and comments and even videos from neighbors that have been submitted.
Rather than having to recover the video of the statement, if it's in the file, that might be helpful.
Okay. Right, so I have a few things to go over with the planning director tomorrow morning. Is there anything else, Mrs. Collins?
Madam Chair, I will make these changes that were proposed and then send you the revised draft so that maybe Susie can put them all together and submit them to Beverly after Wednesday.
Sounds good. All right. Do we want to just have a consensus to authorize Ms. Collins and me to go in and deliver these remarks, or I don't know if we need a formal vote on this.
So moved.
Agreed.
Okay.
So moved.
Agreed.
It's a motion then, and seconded by Mr. Doyle. Any further discussion then? If not, Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Absolutely.
Ms. Collins. And myself, yes. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you for those very helpful comments. Our next agenda item is the fall town meeting and potential articles. We have the budget, FY22 budget revisions as a potential topic for discussion tonight. We may have more information to come next week. Yeah. One budget that I think our board may want to consider is the law budget, and whether we want to make any changes to that. But I think we're going to have some additional information from town council for the meeting on the 28th. Mr. Dennehy, I don't know if we have any other budgets that we want to be discussing this evening. I don't think we do.
No, not necessarily, Madam Chair. Nothing at this time.
You did forward the latest cherry sheet from the state, and I did not have a chance to look at it and see what our net positive or negative. I think it was a small net positive from what we had heard previously, but I did not get a chance to take a look at that.
Madam Chair, it's a slight positive from the governor's estimate, but a slight negative from the House and Senate budget.
Okay,
Approximately, if you recall, the House budget was approximately $62,000 of an increase with the cherry reports from the governors. This is a little over $47,000 reduction of that $62,000 increase. So I think simplistically, it's a $15,000 increase over the governor's original budget presentation.
okay, so
There will be some adjustments necessary.
okay, in October.
Yeah, October or whenever we host the town meeting, because I believe the finance committee and then this board authorized some additional funding to the library and to schools, approximately $57,000 and almost $6,000 on the news of the House report back in May. That has been reduced approximately $47,000. So would have to net those numbers out.
Okay, so if we have to make any budget changes, I think we have to do it in October rather
I
than
agree.
because of
I
that
agree.
tax recap issue that we had the last 2 years. So, so if so, we'll need to talk about that for the 28th, next Wednesday. Mr. Doyle, I think you had your hand up.
Madam Chair, I was just going to ask what was already on the table, if we could have a comparison with last year's, or last year's just get sent out, and we can take a look at the difference. Please, that be okay, Mike?
Certainly, Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay, anything else on town meeting articles? We did hear from the planning director and the planning board chair that they are not anticipating submitting any articles for the October meeting. They're anticipating submitting everything for January.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Wells.
I just think potentially we may have one based on an agenda item that's lower down on our agenda tonight. Possible that we could have one for October.
Okay,
Submitted by us.
and there may be other boards still that are working on articles where, so I had heard at one point the library might have an article, but I haven't heard anything further on that. So, and the citizens can submit articles through the 28th. So we'll have a better sense on Wednesday, the 28th, what the universe of the articles looks like. Is there anything else on this agenda item? Okay, then why don't we go on to number 6, which is a reserve fund transfer. And we already discussed this at our last meeting. It's just a formality. Mr. Zulus.
Madam Chair, just for the purpose of discussion from Mr. Zulus, I'll make a motion to authorize the chair to approve and forward to the warrant committee FY22 reserve fund and year-end transfers for the municipal broadband take rate survey.
That is the way the motion is worded, but I think that's actually incorrect, Mr. Wells. I appreciate your, I think it's
Okay.
really just to approve the reserve, approve and forward to the warrant committee an FY22 reserve fund transfer for the municipal broadband take rate survey. So if you accept that as,
I'll take that. Yeah, I get that. I agree.
I think some of this motion language is carried over from the year end a few weeks ago.
I'll accept that.
I'll second that for discussion. Mr. Zulus, did you want to speak to this?
So I can speak to it, although it is a repeat of the vote that this board took on June 23rd with respect to FY21 that we haven't acted on because of the reasons we discussed last week, that the better practice, which is to have the reserve fund transfer made in the year in which the services are completed. And the only, so I can elaborate on that if we need to, but I think we had the discussion last week. The only thing that's changed is that the warrant committee last night unanimously approved the reserve fund transfer for FY22. So they approved essentially this motion. The warrant committee approved it last night.
That's good news.
Do we even need to vote?
We voted it, but it's a formality. We have the paperwork was filed today. So, all right. So seeing no other discussion, Mr. Doyle.
Yes.
So all in favor. Mr. Doyle was yes. Mr. Zulus.
Yes.
Mr. Wells.
Yes.
Ms. Collins.
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay, next item is the town administrator's annual review, and Mr. Zulus was leading this as the former chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So let me first say that the dilatory nature of this review and responsibility for that lies with me and with me alone. We had intended to get this done in the spring, but we didn't do it. So now we're getting it done. So overall, I circulated last week the consensus evaluation review, which was taken from all of the reviews submitted by the board members. The numerical or the alphabetical indications were a consensus view of all. In other words, I took all, for each category, I took all 5 and went with whatever the majority had for whether the marking would be excellent, meets expectations, or improvement needed. Overall, this review is a very strong review across the board. All of the categories are either the consensus view is excellent, outstanding, or meets expectations. There are a couple of categories where the board members didn't know whether things had been done, and so there was a question mark on a couple of occasions. For example, whether Mr. Dennehy reviews policies and procedures periodically. We just didn't know that. So that was a category that was, but everything else was consensus view was either excellent or meets expectations. I'll point out a couple of things in terms of the individual characteristics that Mr. Dennehy brings to the job. He received among his highest grades of exceeding and outstanding, exceeding excellent and outstanding. His highest grades came in citizen relations, all excellent or outstanding. His highest grades also came in fiscal management, all excellent and outstanding, and in community relations. Those are the highest grades. In a couple of other areas where the predominant responses were meet expectations, and again, meet expectations is certainly a good grade, but in a couple of categories where meet expectations were more predominant were in the staffing and supervision areas. So those are the areas where most of the grades are meet expectations, as opposed to the other areas where I listed where most of the grades were excellent and outstanding. A couple of notes on the narrative as opposed to the alphabetical grades. The first category for narrative was progress towards prior year goals. And just as a recap, during a year of unprecedented challenge of the COVID-19 crisis, Mr. Dennehy nevertheless accomplished many of the prior year goals, despite increased operational and day-to-day management challenges, including in the areas of the solid waste budget gap, staff hiring, and communication with the board. Second, unplanned actions and achievements. Mr. Dennehy's ability to respond to crisis was tested in 2020, and he performed exceedingly well in mobilizing town government. Learning and development plans. Mr. Dennehy consistently sought information and opportunities from local, state, and federal resources throughout the year to improve town government. One area identified for improvement, potential improvement, was communications with staff. And then in the overall evaluation narrative over the last year, Mr. Dennehy worked hard and demonstrated impressive skills in his work on behalf of the town of Milton. Overall, another quote, overall performance is impressive and applauded. Another quote, Mr. Dennehy is able to make difficult decisions with clarity. So overall, a very strong review across the board. Mr. Dennehy also submitted his own self-evaluation, and then he and I reviewed both the self-evaluation and the consensus evaluation from the board.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zulus. Anyone, any comments or questions?
Thank you. Thank you to Mr. Zulus, and thank you to Mr. Dennehy.
Yes. Thank you very much. Mr. Dennehy, did you want to add anything?
No, just it's my pleasure working for the taxpayers of Milton as a 15-year resident who raises his family in this town. It's my pleasure and honor to work for the town and work with this board. This board has been very good to me. It's a two-way street. I really appreciate everything each member of this board and previous boards have done for the town. Your volunteerism is exceptional and it makes Milton what it is. I've said it before, all of the boards and committees in this town are really what is the fabric of the community, the volunteering and the altruism. So I do thank this board and I'm honored, and I couldn't do it without the team surrounding me, including new members like Susie and people like Jen that have been here for quite some time, and Paige and everyone in my office, all the department heads, and most importantly, the people out on the front line that are doing the work, especially in these unprecedented times. So I thank you for that and look forward to hopefully another successful year in town post-pandemic. We can get back to normal. So thank you.
And I think a large portion of this period included the very early months of the pandemic and the highest point of the crisis, when a lot of action needed to be taken in a short time frame. So that was certainly a very unusual year. When you look back at the meeting minutes or the annual report, you just realize everything that took place, that it's easy to forget. Thank you, Mr. Dennehy. Okay, then moving on, we're going to defer item 8, meeting minutes. And number 9, town administrators report.
Very briefly, Madam Chair, 2 things. I just want to make the public aware that another tremendous application was filed by the town, Bill Ritchie and his staff, Tim Zawinski and his staff, through the Mass Department of Energy Resources. This culminated with an award of $100,000 Green Community Grant. This brings the town's total to well over $1 million since the town became a green community. And specifically this $100,000, which we will soon get started on. 62,000 of that will be spent at the Tucker Elementary School, improving building automation systems and controls, and finish off the work that we received last year with LED lighting in the public library. So another $38,000 in addition to the $81,000 that was spent there last year. So again, credit to Bill and Tim Zawinski and their teams. These are very competitive grants. There aren't too many communities in Massachusetts that aren't applying for these. So it's all in the grant writing. So all of the credit goes to them as we continue to green our community. Additionally, anybody who, and just a small tidbit that I'll end with, anybody that has been by Town Hall recently probably notices some changes there. The 2 large trees were taken down last week. I will be putting some pictures on the town's website of those trees, both in the size of them and the amount of rot that was involved in one of the trees, specifically the one to the north of the property. But those trees have been taken down. The tree roots, stumps, weather permitting, should be taken out shortly thereafter. I'm a tree guy per se, but just driving by, it actually kind of looks neat without the trees there. You get a great look at the gazebo. And I'll end with the fact that the gazebo last Friday will work. And thank you to this board for expeditiously getting the funding to Bill Ritchie and his team. But the roof was stripped and they were putting the final touches on the new red cedar roof at the gazebo. It's a new look for the town and Town Hall. I think it looks great. And I want to thank this board and again, Bill Ritchie's group for getting that work done with no inconvenience, very little inconvenience to the public. And that's all I have for tonight.
They did it on 2 of the hottest days, two of the hottest days of the week. They were up there
Yeah.
stripping that roof.
Yeah, if you get a chance, drive by. It's a really new look for the town.
Right, thank you, Mr. Dennehy. That is good news. Chair's report, the only thing I have to report out is that yesterday the town received a project eligibility letter from Mass Housing relating to a comprehensive permit being sought for 40 condominium units at 728 Randolph Avenue. So we had weighed in on this with some comments, and yesterday Mass Housing issued their determination letter. So does anyone have anything else to report? Mr. Doyle, do we have a report tonight?
No reports at this time, Madam Chair.
Okay, Mr. Zulus,
No reports, Madam Chair.
Ms. Collins,
No report, Madam Chair.
Mr. Wells.
Just one quick one, Madam Chair. I just want to give a shout out to Kevin Chrism and everyone in the Parks Department. And we've taken an inordinate amount. This is the most rainy July we've ever had. And as we meet tonight, every field in our town is booked tonight. Every single field is being used by a youth sport or youth activity. That's a pretty amazing thing. And I watched them all day today, so I just want to give a shout out to him and all his crew. They do a great job keep getting those fields back operational.
Okay, that's great. Public comment response. We did not have any public comment this evening. Future agenda items. I sent everyone an email. We're going to have Judy Barrett of Barrett Planning coming in on August 3rd to give a presentation on the East Milton Working Group's report. It is up on the planning board's page on the website. And I think we'll need to check whether we'll do that meeting by Zoom or in person. It may be more convenient for Ms. Barrett if we do that on Zoom. So we'll check that and get back to everyone. Anyone have any other future agenda items? Community happenings. Anything to report? Seeing none. Then I will, next item is an executive session, but there is one item that we're going to, or actually two that we're going to need to defer. 334 Edge Hill Road is not needed this evening. And as in the public session minutes, we're going to defer the executive session minutes without any objection from the members. So we'll only have two items. I will move that we go into executive session to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, the town administrator, believing that having such discussion in open session would have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the board, and to enter executive session to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, 41 Wharf Street, believing that having such discussion in open session would have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the board. Seconded by Mr. Wells. Any discussion? All in favor? Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
myself, yes. We are now in executive session.